So I used to be one of those people that, because I grew up in the church, I knew who God was, I knew the Bible stories, I felt like I had a relationship with God, because when I would pray about certain things, I would definitely see an answer. I would definitely see a response. It would be things that was happening and I would go to God about it, and then I would see that clearly he heard me, right? So one day I went to church and they were preaching on pretty much obedience. And he was like, at the time I was a smoker and I was still doing me, but I felt like I had enough relationship with God. Like, God wasn't gonna send me to hell. Like, that's crazy. Hell is so extreme. You know what I'm saying? Like, clearly he gonna let me in the gate because that's big God. We homies or whatever. And they were preaching on obedience, and they were talking about, like, you know, smoking and drinking and stuff like that. And he said, maybe God will let me into heaven with this pack of cigarettes. He was saying it, you know, sarcastically or ironic or whatever. But I like to, you know, I immediately rejected it, first of all, right? But it was after that that every time I went to go smoke, every time I went to go pick something up, it was playing in my head like a broken record. Maybe God will let me into heaven with this pack of cigarettes. Granted, I wasn't smoking cigarettes. It was Black & Milds or weed or whatever. But it was every time I went to go pick anything up to smoke, it was playing in my head. Maybe God will let me into heaven. And I was like, but God wouldn't send me to hell for like a Black & Mild. You know what I'm saying? For a blunt. Like, it's kind of crazy. The gag is, I really felt like clearly God loves me because he be answering me. He be showing up in my life. He be, you know, hearing me. He be letting me know that he hears me. And for him to send me to hell for anything not extreme to me was crazy. But it really boiled down to the fact that it's not God's love for me that gets me into heaven. God's love for me is what gave me salvation. It's what gave me the offer, the option, the opportunity to be saved, right? It's my love for him that's going to dictate, that's going to predicate, that's going to determine whether or not I'm going to make it into heaven. God says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And I was having a conversation with somebody where they was like, you know, nah, I've never been obedient to God. I've never, you know, kept his word. I've never lived like a sanctified life, a holy life. I've never been. And see, he didn't want to say I didn't live a saved life, you know what I'm saying? Because you saved or you not, you know what I'm saying? There's no black and white with salvation. You're saved or you're not. But he proceeded to say that, you know, I got a relationship with God, da, da, da. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, right? Because that was me. And, you know, God knows my heart. Right. Facts. He does. And that's the gag, right? Is that none of that stuff that's in your heart can make it into heaven with you. So if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, didn't I? And he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you, right? We can feel like we know God and this, that, and the third, and we feel like, you know, God knows us, but there's a level of intimacy that it requires to get into the kingdom. He says, depart from me, I never knew you. And that's a level of intimacy. To know you is to be deeply associated, deeply intimately aware of who you are, deep understanding and a knowledge of a person, right? So we say we know God, but we really talking about surface level. And when God says, depart from me, I never knew you, he's really talking about a deep level. So when those two levels ain't matching up, we don't make it in. So take this moment and take this sign, this video, as a sign today to get serious with God, to get real with him, and to start taking inventory in your life about being obedient. If you're living in a way, if you're doing a thing that you know you ain't got no business doing, if you're doing something that you know you wouldn't do in front of God, with God, or whatever, if you know you're doing something that is in contradiction to his word, you're living in sin. High key, we don't really have to preach about sin. A lot of us know when we're in sin. We just be making excuses and justifying it because it's gratifying to the flesh. Use this as a moment to go to God, take inventory, and to get serious and make a decision to give up everything that you know that is offensive to him, that is a sin to him, and that goes against his word. He is his word, right? Jesus was the word made flesh, and he dwelt among us. So the word, we don't get to pick and choose and cherry pick the parts that are comfortable for us. He is the word. We don't get to pick and choose parts of God that are comfortable for us and reject the other parts that aren't. If we reject any of him, we're rejecting all of him. In the same way that if we break any of the law, we're guilty of all of the law, right? So take this moment to get serious with God and to buckle down and make a decision about being obedient, because there is no salvation outside of obedience.